Mental Health Warriors. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I'm super excited today. As you guys know, if you watch some of my past podcasts, my older brother is a marathon. He runs 8 to 10 marathons a year. And, I'm big on Instagram. I had Ron Dawson on. He was a marathoner and a triathlete. And I became Instagram friends with Matt_B_running. And he's really an awesome runner. And I'm so happy and proud to have him on my podcast today and to talk about, to me, I'm not going to say what he ran the Boston Marathon in, but I want him to say his time, because I think it's pretty awesome. And he was flat booking out there. But I really want him to come on and get to know, let's all get to know who Matt B running is and what he does and what motivates him to run. It's getting warmer outside. People going out and doing more as COVID restrictions come down. They're able to go out and do things, and maybe you've decided that you wanted to, get into running and start running. It's very important to always talk with your doctor prior to starting any physical activity regimen, just to make sure you're all okay and thumbs up. And with that, Matt, I want to say hi. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on the podcast, A Mental Health Warrior. And really, I just want to get to know Matt B running as anybody can. You can follow him on Instagram. He does awesome, great videos. I don't see how you don't trip while you're running with the GoPro. But with that, Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Cliff, thank you so much. I am really happy to be here. I appreciate you reaching out and asking me to be on your podcast. You do great work. And as far as tripping, when I have a GoPro, I have tripped more times than I can count. I just don't put that footage out there.
Well, you should do like an outtake of Matt's tripping outtakes, and
yeah, I've had some pretty bad injuries from tripping. Not always when filming. Usually just through sheer clumsiness. But
and we can talk about the running, but when you run on streets or sidewalks, or I don't run on a track. I have a path here in Virginia I run. And you always got to watch out for potholes, debris in the way you run and things like that. And in Missouri, when I go with my brother, they run in around Springfield, Missouri, and it's always sidewalks, and you switch to pavement. And there's a couple of times I've twisted my ankle. There's a guy in his running group that face planted running. So it can be very treacherous out there while you're out there jogging around. Before you even think about dodging cars.
Yeah, it really can. So last year, before the Boston Marathon was in October in 2021. And I was supposed to go, I was registered, and I was out for a long run one morning, and it was pitch black, no moon, like 4 a.m, getting my run done before work. And I was running on the sidewalk, and some tree roots had come under and kind of pushed up one of the expansion joints. And I didn't see it, and I tripped. When I went down, I stood on the side of the sidewalk, which rolled my ankle, and I ended up twisting my ankle, which stopped me from running the 2021 Boston Marathon. Yeah. So it's pretty close in time to me, tripping and really hurting myself.
That's one thing, and I've rolled my ankle over. Sometimes breaking your ankle, you can heal faster than if you do a hard, if you do a completely rollover. I mean, it can take a long, long time for that to heal, especially if you really stretch out those tendons and things in your ankle.
When those tendons tear, it wasn't pretty. Like, my whole foot was black and blue. You can probably see a picture if you scroll back through my stuff on Instagram. I made sure to get the mileage out of that injury.
But I mean, okay, so I want to talk about that. So how you're a week from starting the Boston Marathon? What was the time frame when you sprained your ankle?
Oh no, it was a little ways out. It was probably it was about 5.5 weeks, because when I went to my orthopedic surgeon, he said, all right, no running for 6 weeks. Wow. And I came back to him. I was like, oh, all right, look, I get it. No running for 6 weeks, but the Boston Marathon is in 5.5 weeks. Do you think we can, jump right back in to running a marathon? And he was like, absolutely not. Yeah. So immediately I was like, I know I have to take the time and heal, but his whole thing was, you can't heal and then jump right back into full-on race mode. So I had the doctors, nixing that race. And luckily I bought insurance that year, because the Boston Marathon actually, I don't know if they're going to moving forward, but they actually make you have insurance. So if for some reason you can't go because of COVID, you can get that refunded. So
Oh.
because my doctor said no, I couldn't run, I actually got the race reimbursed. So it wasn't that big a deal.
But I mean, mentally, I mean, because to run a marathon, it takes a lot of training, right? And
Yeah.
you are a very good runner, and you're probably close to elite athlete as I've ever known one. But mentally, when you twisted your ankle and you got that news from the doctor, how did that affect you? Because that had to have an effect on you, because here you are 5 weeks out from the race. You're out for a run, you roll your ankle, and now you can't run anymore. I mean, that had to be pretty devastating, upsetting.
Yeah, it is a tough thing. And thank you. It's very kind of you to use the word elite and me in the same sentence. I am far from elite.
You're pretty close.
Well, let's just agree to disagree.
Okay, what do you disagree?
You know what the funny thing is that I always tell people get tied up with how fast they're running and how long they run. And I always tell people that, listen, no matter who you are, there is always going to be someone faster than you.
Yeah.
On any given day, even the fastest guy in the world, there are several people like the fastest people in the world. And on any given day, any one of them could win.
Yeah.
So you can't just settle into it and think, oh, I wish I was faster. It's an individual journey.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to think about. Otherwise, we start comparing ourselves to others, which is another mental rabbit hole to go into, which we need to steer clear of. But as far as being injured, and then realizing that my goal wasn't going to be achieved, it's pretty devastating. Now I've been running for a little while, so about 14 years now I've been running seriously. When I say seriously, I mean like a recreational athlete. Like, I enjoy running. I've been doing it on a regular basis for about 14 years. So in the past, I was affected by things like that a lot more than I was this time. And there are several factors that go into me feeling that way. Okay. So the first thing was, it's obviously going to be disappointing, but I also realized that, this was going to be my 47th marathon. So it's not like it was my first or second or third, or I'm trying to run as fast as I've ever run.
Right.
It was just another marathon. Mm. Now, it is the Boston Marathon, so it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like I had pinned all my hopes and dreams on this race.
Right.
It was something that I enjoyed doing, and I didn't get to do it. I was able to put it into perspective.
Yeah.
Now, I was also able to put it into perspective because in 2021, they moved the Boston Marathon from April to October.
Yeah.
So I knew that the 2022 Boston Marathon was going to be back in April. So I didn't get to run in October, but I only had to wait 6 months until I got to do the Boston Marathon again. So that was a way of justifying it to myself, to make myself feel better. It's like, you know what, I do have time to heal, and I can ramp back up. I can do a couple more races in between, and then I can just go and run the Boston Marathon in April, when it's traditionally held. And generally speaking, the weather is better in April in Massachusetts than it is in October.
Yes.
October can be very hot.
Yes. My wife's from Massachusetts originally, from Worcester.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
okay.
But you bring up a good perspective. So, a lot of people, when they have an injury or when they start feeling like you did, you were taking a negative and you taught yourself to turn that into a positive. And that's something for people, it's very hard for them to do that. When something negative happens in their life, to really look at it and try to turn it and make it a positive. I don't know if you saw the post I did on Instagram when I talked about my suicide attempt. And, sometimes you go back and I reflect, about, what would have happened had I succeeded that, right? And instead of, dwelling on what got me to that point, I was really thinking about all the things that I've done since that attempt or since that day. And you think about all the positives. You brought up a really great point that you were injured. You're not going to be able to race in the Boston Marathon. But wait a second, this is Matt's 47th marathon. Okay, so it's just another marathon. It's Boston. And then you said something that was really great. You looked at the time. It's October, and 6 months from now, it's April, and then I'm going to race it. So really, I didn't have to dwell on it for a year. And I think that was a really good point that you brought up and talked about.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's as far as like when we don't get what we want. My wife often says this. She's like, when you don't get what you want, you change what you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wasn't able to run the Boston Marathon. So yeah, I could sit around and feel bad about myself and twiddle my thumbs, or I could just focus on something else. Because if I'm honest, it's the training and the looking forward to an event that I enjoy more than the event.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's that anticipation that is the real benefit. So yeah, it was disappointing, but you know, it's not. You have to put it into perspective. I mean, I'm not a professional athlete. I don't feed my family based on my running.
Right.
I do it for fun. I do it because it's something that I like to chase. And sometimes I find that, you know, once you put it into perspective, it becomes a little more clear. And it's like, well, you know what? This isn't the end of the world, and I can still do what I want. And you know what? Maybe something better will come out of this race. You know, so yeah, it's I don't feel bad about it now, even looking back. It worked out quite well, especially because I was very happy with the April Boston Marathon that just occurred. It was beautiful weather. You know, everyone was happy.
Yeah. It was a good time. It didn't rain, did it? Because we've had a lot of rain in Virginia. I don't think it rained during.
No, it was blue sky. It was high 40s.
Oh,
it was just the most beautiful running weather.
That's great. And so everybody who doesn't know, who doesn't follow Matt B Running on Instagram, tell us what you ran the Boston Marathon in, and did you achieve your goal that you had set for yourself for that race?
Yes,
or did you overachieve?
Well, yes, I overachieved just a little bit. So I actually, so about the week before I did the Boston Marathon, I looked into all these race calculators using all different metrics. Mm-hmm. So I run with a couple different watches, a couple different things. Like I've got the Stride FootPod, and this measures my power. So this was something else that gave me a predicted time. I used some popular online predicting tools. So I had a predictor anywhere from like 305 to 315, which is quite a spread.
Yeah.
I then took into account that the Boston Marathon is quite hilly. Now it is a net downhill course, but it's quite hilly. There's a lot of uphills, especially around the 20-mile mark. Between 16 and 21 is generally uphill when you're in the Newton Hills. So I knew that was going to take a lot out of me. So anyway, long story short, I made my goal 3 hours and 10 minutes. And I actually ran 3 hours, 8 minutes and 30 seconds.
Wow.
So yes, I beat my goal and I was very happy with it. And I think I ran a good race, which is actually more satisfying than making the time.
Yeah.
So I could have run 3 hours and 11 minutes and I wouldn't have met my goal. But if you're strategizing right and you're putting in that effort, it's funny how the actual time becomes somewhat obsolete. You know, when you work hard towards something, that really is the satisfying thing. And I've had other races where I've been the same way.
Yeah. Have you ran a marathon in under 3 hours?
Yes. Yeah. I haven't done it in a couple of years. I've run
What's
Boston
your fastest
twice,
marathon?
2:51:59.
Wow.
But that was back in 2010 when I was a much younger man.
10 years younger, yeah.
Yeah. You know, when you're in your early 30s, that's like the peak time for marathoning. So yeah, I was, you know, I've run under 3. I think I do have another sub 3 in me. But the whole thing is, am I motivated enough to train to get to that sub 3? And I've got to find a course that actually favors me running a sub 3.
Yeah.
So you know, Boston may not be it at this stage.
So for you, where you live, is it fairly flat where you live? So is it hard to find the big hills to run? I mean, here in Virginia, I run the Army 10 miler. This will be my 7th one this year that I run. But just like you were saying on Army 10 miler, on mile 7 and 8, you're going uphill. And then you go downhill and you loop back around to the Pentagon. But I can train, you know, I got some running trails that I do where it's hilly and some running trails that I do that it's not, you know, so I train on the hills when I need to or when I want to. And so if you're on a fairly flat land, like I used to live down at Fort Monroe, Virginia, and it was at sea level. And so there was no hills. I mean, it was flat. And so when I would go and run, you know, it'd become difficult when you hit those hills. And I imagine that if where you live, where you live is not very hilly, is it?
No, it's very flat.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So for my health
training, do you train for that?
It's a good question. You have to find the hills, and there aren't many naturally occurring hills in my area of Florida, like kind of Southwest Florida.
Yeah.
So let's see. About once a week, I would head out to. There's a mall a couple miles from my house, and there's a parking lot that has an incline, and I would just run up and down that hill. Of course, we have a lot of bridges to get out to our barrier islands,
Oh yeah.
and those are quite high, so the sailboats can get under them. And so if I want real hill training, I will go out, I'll go to downtown Sarasota. There's a big bridge, and I will just run back and forth over that bridge. And you can actually get some good elevation by running on the bridges.
Yeah.
So it's a good tool, but I can't just leave the house and then find a hill. I've got to specifically go and seek out these hills and then just repeat it over and over again.
Yeah. It's funny. So when I go out, and if I go out of my house and I cross the highway and I go right to the running trail, that one's more flat. But then if I go left, that's the hilly one. And I did a video on Instagram a while back with the hill's pretty big that I go up, and it probably goes on for maybe a half mile. The hill does going up. And, I made a video of when I finally got back to running, and I ran all the way up that hill, and I was kind of proud of myself over the fact that, before I had to stop before I made it to the top of the hill. And then this happened to this day that I was able to run all the way up to the top of the hill. And that was a little big win for me. It feels good, right? It feels like,
yeah, it feels really good. You set these goals and running uphill. I mean, no one's ever going to say that running uphill is easy. It's not easy. You're fighting gravity. Your heart rate's going through the roof. It's a big deal when you reach a goal like that. So yeah, good on you.
Some days my running partner, I run with my dog. I got to have a boxer and Falco, and he's great. And some days he just doesn't feel it. He doesn't want to run. And, I did a video on this, is that, with Falco, usually for the first mile and a half, he's sniffing and peeing and pooping and doing all the dog stuff. But as soon as we get to that point where I'm going to turn around and he knows we're going back home, he's flat out running. He's done with all that. He knows we're going home. He knows it's going to end. And all he wants to do is run. And I'm like, Falco, you little shit. You've been, making me walk all over the place. And then all of a sudden you want to just want to run home. And then we get home and then he wants to play ball for the next 2 hours. So it's quite funny.
It's a funny thing that ties into nicely with like human motivation as well, because people will find that strength towards the end of an event. It doesn't matter what the distance is. You'll find people that are struggling to run 100 miles, but then they're able to run the last mile to the finish.
Yeah.
Because they know, they smell the barn. They're like, all right, let's pick it up and run it in.
Like I said, I gotta get a drink water here. My allergies are killing me today.
Oh, it's the same down here. It's been a nightmare.
In Virginia, it was really cool all spring, and we've had a lot of rain, and then all of a sudden it started warming up, and it was like everything bloomed out at once. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But you were talking about, towards the end of the race, people get that motivation, they see the end and they want to get there. My brother talks about, when he's running a marathon. I'm sorry, my dog was barking. When you hit mile, I think he said it was 22 or 20 or 22 miles. That's really when you start hitting the wall, and you kind of have to train yourself to get past that. If somebody's out there and they're having a hard time with those miles in between there, I think it's either probably 18 to 22, I imagine. What things do you do to get you over that push to get that race finished? Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense, and there's actually a pretty easy answer, and that you have to eat more. So the reason that people run into that wall at between 18 miles and 20 miles is that they run out of glycogen. So typically the human body can run for about 2 hours at around marathon pace. Obviously it's different for everyone. For someone that runs a 4-hour marathon, they could hit that wall at the halfway point. For elites, well, they're running around the 2-hour mark. So they don't have to worry too much about that running out of glycogen and hitting the wall. So, but for an average runner, that's why the wall comes at around 18 to 20, sometimes 21, 22, because your body runs out of glycogen, then it's hard to fuel for those miles. Now, once your body runs out of glycogen, it's very hard to pull it back. Like you've kind of, you're not going to be able to run as well if you hit the wall. You might be able to keep going. You might be able to eat something and keep going, but you won't be performing at your best. So the best way to counter that is to fuel up until that point. And then hopefully you won't run out of glycogen and you'll be able to run your race and finish strong. So that's why people practice fueling in their training. That's why when I ran the Boston Marathon, I used I think three gels, and each gel was 200 calories,
No.
45 grams of carbohydrates, and I was taking that like, I don't know, every 45 minutes or so, and that kept me feeling really good. Although the Boston Marathon was very hard, there were points that were like down points where my legs were getting really heavy, and it was a bit of a challenge, keeping an eye on my heart rate. I never felt like I was running out of energy. It was more like muscular fatigue.
Yeah.
So muscular fatigue is something that you can deal with a little more because your body isn't shutting down because it doesn't have the fuel to go. That's when it switches to a more mental component, and you can kind of talk yourself into continuing.
Yeah. And like I said, I've never ran a marathon. Like I said, I do the Army 10 miler, and that's the limit. I have a lot of injuries, but I work around that, and I enjoy that. But it's funny that when people think a marathon, somebody's going to train for a marathon, right? But it's amazing how many people think, oh well, 10 miles, I can do 10 miles, and they don't train for it. There was in 2018, I think it was, on the Army 10 miler. No, 2017. That it was just hot. They run it in October, and it was just hot. It was really hot that day. It was had gotten in the 80s, and they had so many people fall out with heat injuries. They had to actually shorten the race because the hospital's filled up. There's 30 some odd thousand people that run the Army 10 miler, and
it's a big race.
They had to shorten the race. I'd already finished by that time when it happened. But I'm thinking, what are these people thinking? I mean, when I came down around the 9 mile, you shoot through Crystal City, there were people laid out on the sidewalk that had passed out, and people, giving first aid and all kinds of stuff. I'm thinking, what are these people, thinking in their minds and not training, or at least doing something properly to think they could just go out there and do that? It just boggles the mind into that, people would do that. But I mean, there was thousands of people, that were injured that day just because it was hot. It was in the 80s. Now I run year round. So if it's 90 degrees one day, I'm still running. So for me, it didn't have that much of an effect on me. Because I was used to running in those different environments. But if you haven't been working out and you think, well, I'm just going to go jot and do 10 miles, Ron Dawson brought up a good thing when he talked about it. He says, how can you run 26 miles? Have you ever walked 26 miles? Because you can't run 26 miles if you can't walk 26 miles. And I think for a lot of people, it says, if you can't walk a mile, can you run a mile? That's what he was getting at, for people just to work out. It's important to know your body and know what you're doing. But I just felt sad because some people were injured pretty good.
The heat injuries are no joke. But you bring up a good point about people running a 10 miler, and I think you have to look at every race distance. Every race distance is equal to every other race distance. So I don't think a marathon is anything special. It's just a specific, somewhat arbitrary distance. 42.2 kilometers, 26.2 miles. It is pretty arbitrary, but you train for that distance. So your energy output is measured for that distance.
Yeah.
So if I'm running a 10 miler, I'm going to be running substantially faster than I would run a marathon.
Yeah.
But my effort output is still the same. I still want to start with a full tank of gas, and when I reach the finish, I want that tank to be empty.
Yeah.
So with that said, everyone's race is going to be, whether it's a 1 mile race or a marathon, you're going to be putting out a lot of effort. It's either going to be measured or it's not.
Yeah.
But as far as the heat training goes, running in the heat is it's never fun.
It's not fun. No.
And a lot of people fall into the trap of not adjusting their pace for the weather.
Yeah.
Because your body just doesn't work. I mean, we're just like cars. Our cars run better when it's cool out. Our bodies run better when it's cool out.
Yeah.
And if you don't take that into account, and you start off at the pace that you think you're going to cover that distance, that 10 miles, well, you're going to get to mile 8, and it's going to be, your heart rate is going to have been 20 beats higher than it ordinarily would have been if it was 30 degrees cooler. And your body's going to shut down, which sounds like exactly what happened when people are lying around.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was, I'd never seen that. And then the first year I ran it, it was 40-mile-an-hour wind and snowing when we started the race. And then by the time it ended, the sun had moved on and it was 50 degrees outside. Now I'm a guy that runs in shorts and a t-shirt. It can be 25 degrees and I'm in shorts and a t-shirt still. It's just, and so it's kind of brutal to stand there and wait because they start in waves, to wait for your wave. I think I was wave 5. It was brutal to stand there and wait for your wave to start because, you're just standing there in the wind and the cold and the snow, but it was fine. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet it was more comfortable than the 80-degree day.
Yes.
Especially when you're running.
Yeah. Yeah. And there you're running throughout the city, and this well as I do, you run inside cities and it's a lot hotter. The air doesn't move around a lot. And if for me, it's humid in Virginia all the time, so I'm used to it. So that doesn't, bother me so much. But, I go out and do speaking events, and I went out to Fort Irwin last year and did a speaking event there in the desert in California. And something I didn't realize, I was like, yeah, you know what? It wasn't hot outside. It was I think it was in the morning. No, it was late evening. I'm just going to go for a little short 3-mile run. And I'm in the desert. Now I haven't ran in the desert since I was in Iraq in 06, 08. And so I took off. I didn't bring water with me or nothing. I took off running, and I got about 2 miles from the hotel, and I had to duck into another hotel and go in there and get water because I wasn't prepared for the heat and the dry. It dried out my whole nose and everything. I was like, well, that was.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, well, I won't do that again. But in my speaking event, I'd thrown up on the board of where I ran, and I told that story that, I wasn't prepared, and I should have been. I at least should have taken a bottle of water with me.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about it. It's like, that's only 3 miles, it's no big deal, no big whoop, and woof, it hit me. I was surprised.
Yeah. And if you're not used to it, it'll come back to bite you.
Yeah.
Imagine if that hotel wasn't there.
I know, right? That would have been, because I didn't bring money with me, and I usually have put money in my pants. I didn't have my ID card or nothing. I was just gonna go out for a little jaunt. Because I was, riding on the plane, I like to get out and move around after I fly on a plane for a little while across the country. Yeah. But I was kind of surprised by that. One thing that you posted on Instagram the other day, and I want you to talk, because when you start running, it's important to have the right equipment, right? And a lot of people don't think about the right kind of socks to wear, the moisture weakening socks, the right kind of shorts, and tennis shoes. Shoes are so important when you're running. And so
I think so.
Mind to talk about that a little bit, and the importance of getting the right shoe, the kind of shoe that you run in, and just kind of, take us through that, from a beginner runner to somebody that has been like you has been running for a long time. What do you look at in a shoe when you go and run? Because I know there's specific shoes that I like to run in, and I stick with that model of shoe. And until they don't have it anymore, and then I have to find a different shoe, and that's very frustrating. When you run in one shoe, and then the company doesn't make that shoe or that model anymore, and then you got to switch to another shoe, and then you go through that. So if you wouldn't mind talking about it a little bit, because I think that's really important, because to keep you from getting shin splints or having knee pain or ankle pain. I mean, shoes play an important role because you're pounding on that pavement.
Right. You brought up a good point about wearing. You get used to something, you want to wear the same pair of shoes forever. Like, you found what works. If it ain't broke, why fix it?
Yeah.
But then every year the companies come out with another model of that same shoe, and they make little tweaks.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it doesn't feel as good as it did the year before. So then people are looking around for that last year's model. On the plus side, you could get it for a lot cheaper, but on the negative side of things, those shoes are going to be sold out more often than not. Yeah. As far as shoes goes, yes, they're very important, and you'll see me running in a lot of different shoes. It's a little different for me because I purposely go to different shoes because I want to review them on the YouTube channel. I want to have content to put on Instagram, and that's kind of what I've made my niche into.
Yeah.
So it's been a benefit for me in that way because I do get to try a lot of different shoes. However, you have to take all of the shoe tubers out there, all the people reviewing all these running shoes, take everything they say with a pinch of salt, because when it comes down to it, our individual comfort is what matters most.
Yeah.
It's not one specific part of a shoe. It's not like the carbon fiber plate that, returns this much energy. Mm-hmm. Those shoes don't work for everyone, but you might find a nice daily trainer. So let's take the Nike Pegasus or the Brooks Ghost. Those have been around for a long time. Those are Nike's and Brooks' biggest sellers, and they're not particularly exciting. Right? They're not particularly exciting, but they do what they do, and they do what they do well. So if you wanted to have a shoe that, you know, is not overly exciting, it doesn't like, you're not going to see people, the world-class marathoners winning races in those shoes, but what you are going to do is have a lot of miles very comfortably.
Yeah.
So, and I don't mean to recommend the Nike Pegasus or the Brooks Ghost, because everyone's going to be different, and you might try something else, you know, and find that that works for you. So that is the number one thing. It's finding what works for you over different runs.
Yeah.
Now, once you've been running for a while, you might think, you know what, that shoe is just, it's a little heavy. I think if I can take off a couple ounces, I'm going to be able to run faster.
Yeah.
But that's more of a personal financial decision and how much you want to invest in your sport, you know, by having those lighter shoes, because you will run faster in lighter shoes. It's just physics. You're not moving as much weight with each step. But yeah, when it comes down to it, it's a very individual thing. And you'll hear me talking about shoes and how much I like X over Y.
Yeah.
But you have to take that with a pinch of salt. If you want to buy something that I recommend, that's great. But walk around in the house first. If you buy it from a place that has a good return policy, return it if it doesn't feel good. Because I like something doesn't mean that you necessarily will. Yeah. And I think that's important for especially newer runners that might not have the experience. You know, I wouldn't recommend getting the shoe with all the latest technology and spending $200 on a pair of shoes, when for $100, $120, you can get a pair of shoes that will last you for a very long time, and they will be pretty good at doing everything.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said for a nice, dependable, but boring shoe.
Yeah, that's what I wear. A nice I just switched to a new brand. My brother tells me what brands to get. I'd have to go upstairs and grab it to see what it is. But it has the carbon fiber through the middle of it. I don't know, it was like $180, $190. But generally on my shoes will generally last around 4 months before I have to get a new pair, 3 to 4 months, depending on how much I run. And I think, you know, for a lot of people, when they go out running, they buy a pair of shoes, and then, you know, they don't realize when those shoes start wearing out that they need to go and get another pair, because if you run a lot in your tennis shoes, they're going to wear out like anything. You know, everything always wears out. And I really know that because I pronate a little bit with my stride, right? So I'm working on the outside of my foot. So when I start getting pain in my heel, I know my shoes are starting to get wore out and I need to go get another pair. And there was one time that I ignored that and I ran on them for another month just because I was being lazy. And I got shin splints so bad, I'll never do that again.
Yeah,
you know, I learned my lesson.
It definitely happens, and it's better to be more proactive. And it's a tough thing, especially if you're buying $180 running shoes. Mm-hmm. It's a tough thing to maybe buy a new pair of shoes after 4 months when you think, I think I could put this off for another month. Yeah. But you never know. You're rolling the dice, and it may come back to bite you. It may not. But I think it's best to replace our shoes sooner rather than later. Now, Cliff, let me ask you, how do you decide when your shoes need to be replaced? Do you track the mileage? Is it just a feeling?
I generally track the mileage now. I run between 5 and 6 days a week. I used to run on Sundays, but my wife, she's still active duty Navy, so she's up in Rhode Island, so I'm here with my boys, so it's kind of hard for me to run on Sundays. But during the week, they're at school. Generally, you know, I'll run with Falco, we'll run 3 to 4 miles a day. If he's not with me, I'll run 6 miles, depending. The closer it gets to Army 10 miler, then I'll throw in Sunday runs where I'll run 10 miles. So generally, I do between 12 and 20 miles a week. It varies. I have my elliptical and my bike, and I have a treadmill here at the house. On Sunday, I do work out on that. So on Sundays, my workout generally is I do the bike for 30 minutes, I do the elliptical for 30 minutes, and I walk on the treadmill for 30 minutes. That's my Sunday workout because I can be here in the house. I have a very nice gym at my house, and I can do that. And if the boys interrupt me, then it's no big deal. But usually when I get around the 3 month mark, the 3.5 month mark, I really start looking at, you know, getting another pair of shoes. You know, they get about 300 miles on them, 400 miles on them. They're getting pretty worn out. And I can tell by the soles because, like I said, the outside of my sole starts wearing down.
Yeah.
on them, just the way my stride is. So
Yeah.
and
It's
I know
probably,
that.
it's a good indicator of when it's time to get new shoes.
But I do like
Mm.
the new ones. I wish I remember the name of them. I do like the new running shoes I got because they really do help a lot. And it's just like you said, it's I used to run on I think it was the ASICS 3000 GT. I ran on those for years, and they
Okay.
kept making them. And it took me, I think, two different pairs of shoes till I finally found this one pair that I have now that I actually like running in. And so it can be quite frustrating, when they don't make that model anymore and you can't get it. And like you said, they came out the new model, and the new model's changed,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't feel right or work right. So
Yeah. It's a frustrating thing because, when we find what we like, it's only natural. We want to stick with it. It's
mhm.
like you're removing a barrier to a decision that you have to make during the day. And all of a sudden it's changed, and now you have to look around and find a new shoe. It's a real pain in the butt. But hopefully, whatever shoe you're running in now, it lasts a little while, and you're able to just, if you think it's going to be retired, just load up, go on those discount sites, and just scoop them up, as many as you can buy.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. I should do that if they're going to get rid of mine soon. Matt, we talked about the importance of getting the right gear. Here's the thing for me. I have an issue finding the right kind of socks I like. I wear the dry lock socks to try to keep your feet as dry because, obviously when you're running in warm weather, you're going to sweat a lot. Your feet are going to move around
Mm.
inside those shoes. And if you're not ready for it, you can get blisters on them. You can get hot spots on your feet. Do you try different pairs of socks as you're testing with shoes, or do you or do you wear socks when you run, or do you run with no
Yes,
socks?
I do. And let's see, I'm trying to think how long it's been since I've been wearing running specific socks. It's probably been 10 years.
Yeah,
But I remember that I would just wear sport socks before I went to running specific socks.
yeah,
And I thought, that's fine. Who wants to spend $10 on a pair of socks?
yeah,
Well, I can answer that. I want to spend $10 on a pair of socks
yeah,
because it is amazing how much better it feels in your shoe when you have the right pair of
yeah.
socks. And I completely understand people rolling their eyes saying, oh, that's so ridiculous, because some of these running socks get up to $15, $16, $17.
Yeah, I think I
And
paid
yes,
$20 for 3 pair, I think, for mine or something, or 2 pair.
but it's worth every penny because
Oh yeah,
they are made from materials that are not going to promote chafing, which is going to stop blisters. They
yeah,
have padding in the right areas, so under the ball of your foot, under the heel of your foot, and then there's going to be arch support built in. It's just everything about specific running socks. I'm all for it.
you
And I've
know.
been running. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say I've been running with Swiftwick socks
Swiftly.
mostly for the last couple of years. Those have been the brand that I've been, mostly going to, and I just really like everything about them. As well as I think they look pretty cool. Some of my running videos, when I have the camera down by my feet, the socks are also part of the show.
Yeah,
So some of the socks are pretty fun to look at. So
yeah.
it's form as well as function.
I can't wait for you to do a video. You'll have to wait for a cool day, and you're wearing that T-shirt you got on there while you're running.
Yeah, it's
But
gonna
you
be
don't want to
it's
run
gonna
too
be a
far,
little
and
while.
it's not moisture wicking like a normal
Yeah,
shirt.
I would definitely wear this out on a run, but it's probably going to be 6 months. Our temperatures aren't going to get below 70 degrees and 100% humidity for at least 6 months now.
Yeah.
So
That's why you run at 4 o'clock in the morning.
yes, it's funny. I live in Florida, but I steer clear of the sun as much as possible.
Yeah.
So it's my preference to run before sunrise. Now, on my days off, like this morning, I was able to time it a little better, and as I was able to go out, and I was out at sunrise because I can't take videos. I can't take my running videos when it's dark out.
Yeah.
It just doesn't come out as well.
You can't
So
get your
when I'm
wife to
off,
hold the lights for you while you're running to do the video.
and that would be nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
just drive behind me. I'll set up a rig on the car and just shine lights. Yeah. If I had enough time or the inclination to build a rig like that, maybe I would. But
Yeah.
I'll use the sun for now.
Now there you go. Yeah, it's cheaper that way.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, I'm gonna wrap it up here, but I wanna thank you for coming on my show. We're gonna make sure that we flash up your YouTube page and your Instagram. Because the videos you doing just to watch, it's very fun. People enjoy them, and I just want to thank you again for coming on my show. And is there any advice or that you want to give the audience as we close out here, as they start running, or maybe they're a marathoner and they're trying to get faster or whatever they want to do? I post my runs, but I never post my time because I don't keep track of my time. I run for distance, so if I put my goal in my mind that I'm going to run for 3 miles that day, I run for 3 miles. If I were going to run for 6 miles, I run for 6 miles. So to me, time doesn't mean anything to me. And that's why I never post my times, because it doesn't mean anything. Now, I know for Boston marathons and for other marathons, you have to have posted times because they don't want somebody taking 6 hours to run the race. And so, time does come important. But, for those people out there, and not so much the beginners, but let's say you get the intermediate runners like you, what advice would you have for them just to kind of get them to maybe go a little faster, or maybe get to that next level they're trying to get to that they haven't been able to?
Well, it all comes down to structuring, but more than that, and this is what I thought about before I came on the podcast, I was like, there is something I'd like to mention. And this is more for new runners, because if you've been running for a little while, you probably realize this. But I've got to say that I don't enjoy every single run I go out on, right? I go out and it isn't feeling good. But you know what? I've got to have that discipline in order to meet my goals. So I also know that if it doesn't feel good in the beginning, it is probably going to start to feel better as I start to warm up.
Yeah.
And I think that is what running well, and well is a individual thing. I think that's what running well is all about. It's having that discipline to go out, even if you might not feel like it, because you've probably heard it 1,000 times. I know I've said it, and every other person out there that talks about running says that consistency is the secret sauce of running.
Yeah.
You have to do it on a regular basis and you will get better. And that means sometimes going out when you don't feel like it and kind of pushing through. So even this morning's run, I went out and I ran a little over 10 miles, very easy. And it didn't feel good. Like the whole run, I was like, it's just a little bit of a slog. And it was probably just an attitude, because my heart rate was still low. And I had a lot of other stuff to do. I knew I had several YouTube videos that I needed to film today. It's my only day off for the next week and a half. So there was a lot of that stress, but I knew that it really didn't matter how I felt, because I'm working towards a goal.
Matt, you bring up a good point. Some days you can run and have the best run ever, and some days it's a struggle. And, I was a personal trainer for a lot of years in the gym. And, one thing I used to always tell people, just come into the gym. Don't worry about losing weight. Don't worry about what exercise you're going to do. Just come every day for the first, 3 days a week, or however, whatever the goals was working out. And as a personal trainer, and I helped them. And I said, just come and do it. Just go walk for 10 minutes a day, or go walk for 15 minutes, or just go get up and go do something, especially on those days where you're not feeling, here on Mental Health Warrior, we talk a lot about PTSD and triggers and things like that. And just changing your mindset and going out and doing something different really can have a huge impact on you and the day. And I'm sure, like you were talking about this morning, you had a lot to do. You got you're coming on my podcast to film, and you got your YouTube videos to do and all these postings. And you really wasn't feeling your run in the beginning. But as that goes on, I know this for me, as my run goes on and I kind of, get those endorphins flowing and whatever, I do start feeling better, and it kind of really changes my mindset. Well, hey, Mental Health Warriors, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I want to thank Matt for taking time out of his busy schedule. You will see all of Matt's social media accounts, and check out his YouTube page, and be sure to like and subscribe to his YouTube page. And I appreciate everybody tuning in. Also, I would like for you to go out and like and subscribe to the Veterans Trash Talk network. We have all of our podcasts out there. You can go out there and get your neat Veterans Trash Talk t-shirts like I have on and Matt has on, and really go out there and support the cause and support veterans. And with that, everybody, you guys have a great week, and thank you for tuning in. Take care.